Hey there, everyone. It's Scott Gerfen. Welcome to OSBA's Leading the Way podcast, where we bring you the voices that shape public education across Ohio. A big thank you to our friends at Pappas and Associates who helped make this podcast possible. Here today is Will Schwartz of Pappas and Associates. He's been around public education for many years, and I wanted to get his take on the next two-year state budget. He's certainly been watching very closely. Will, thanks so much for being here.
Good to be here, Scott.
So it's the first week of May. Lawmakers are back at the Statehouse. Let's start with the basics. Where are we in the process right now? What just happened? And what does it mean that the budget has now cleared the Ohio House?
Okay. Well, halftime's over. We're in the third quarter of the proverbial football game. The governor had his opportunity to present his budget proposal for the first quarter. The House did theirs in April for their budget proposal in the second quarter. We've had 2 weeks off for the General Assembly, and the week of the 28th marked the return of the General Assembly to continue the second half of the game. So the Senate, for a 3-week period, are going to be holding hearings in the standing committees in all the respective areas that the budget will be hearing it, whether it's education, health, finance, tax and budget, things like that. We will then see the Senate Finance Committee reconvene at the end of May, and then about a week or so later, roughly June 2nd, June 3rd, we're going to see a first round of changes from the Senate Republican caucus in terms of the substitute bill. A week later, we'll see a new version. The Senate will pass it out, and then roughly middle of the month, a conference committee between the House and the Senate are going to get together and reconcile the differences between the two versions. That will lead up to a roughly June 25th vote on the conference committee report from the House and the Senate, and Governor Mike DeWine will have roughly 4 or 5 days by that point to review the bill and decide what, if anything, he wants to line item veto.
So with the budget in the Senate now, who are the key players in this chamber when it comes to the budget? Who's taking the lead on this process?
Well, Finance Committee Chairman Jerry Serino is in charge. Robert McCulley is the president of the Senate, but his top lieutenant of sorts is Jerry Serino, who leads that powerful Finance Committee, where he will review all of the thousands of budget amendments that the members of the Senate will submit to him by the May 16th deadline that the Senate has set. And so he is a very influential and powerful lawmaker when it comes to enacting a $60+ billion budget that funds government operations, funding for schools, healthcare, corrections, higher education institutions, and so on and so forth. So, Jerry Serino was the number 2 on the Finance Committee chairman last session under, the retired Matt Dolan, the former chairman. So it's not his first rodeo in seeing, what works, what doesn't, and how to, operate the process. But we see Jerry as being a leader for that process. And obviously Andy Brenner for education is the Education Committee chair, who will carry great sway with the General Assembly in terms of education policy issues for the budget.
So every chamber has its own approach. What would you say is the general philosophy of the Senate when it comes to this budget? And is it likely to go along with the House version? Are there going to be major changes?
Well, it's important to look at who's in charge in the Senate and what the numbers are. President McCulley was the number 2 in the Senate last session under former Senate President Matt Huffman, who's now Speaker of the Ohio House right now. So there's certainly some synergy and like-minded political philosophy from a political perspective and policy perspective between those two individuals. So we've not seen any indications that the chambers are at odds on any big ticket issues. We know the Cleveland Browns, stadium proposals, there might be, but when it comes to education, they're very like-minded in terms of their approach, in terms of funding schools, accountability, things like that. So we anticipate many of the changes that the House has put forward in terms of education funding, as well as policy issues, will be maintained, and perhaps some new items will be added by the Senate as well.
So let's shift now to what school board members and school district leaders are watching most closely, and that's education funding. One of the big things I'm hearing is this term cash balance for school districts. And can you talk about that, and what is its relation to property taxes?
So what the House did in its budget proposal was kind of a two-pronged approach. was that we feel as a chamber, we feel as a caucus, that school districts should not be holding on to taxpayer money beyond a threshold of what they said was 30% of your budget, and that if it's above that amount, we are going to provide that back to taxpayers in the form of a tax reduction. That cash balance provision is the top issue for school districts across the state, and that's because it's $4.2 billion that's on the table right now that is subject to a loss. And school leaders are responding to say that this is a tax cut today, but it's a tax increase tomorrow. And that's because the process by which this works is the cash balances get spent down to get you under that 30% threshold. And then in the next year, you're under that threshold and the tax rates jump back to where they were. So homeowners will see a reduction in the first year in most areas around the state. Even if your district is under that, you're not seeing a reduction at all because your district's under that threshold. And then in the next year, your rates go back up to where they are. And because of that cap, that threshold, school districts have a new system in which they have to budget and finance, which means we can no longer take a larger bite at the apple in terms of raising revenue through levies. So we're going to take smaller bites at the apple, which means more levies on a more frequent basis over time. And as we know, Ohio is the largest school levy state in the country, and new money levies in Ohio fail at 70% failure rate. So we anticipate that failure rate is going to grow even higher as schools will continually have to go to the ballot sooner and sooner under this proposal.
So in what you're describing, I mean, is this comparable to say my checking account where I get money comes in from my employer and, I've got bills in to pay, but some of these districts are trying to spread this out over a number of years, right?
Absolutely. And there's unique and differing reasons for why a district has a cash balance throughout the state. Some have, influxes of new pipeline money that they've seen come in recently that have contributed to, a larger balance. Others have a cash balance as a form of property taxpayer relief, that we have a little bit of a higher balance so that we don't have to go back to the voters sooner than they might otherwise want to have to, respond on an election. Others are using, those funds to pay debt obligations through what's called a certificate of participation. There's $3.2 billion in that debt instrument across 220 districts in the state right now. And that is in jeopardy in terms of the cash balance being used to fund that being taken away through this measure spells pretty scary outcomes for some of the school districts across the state.
And in terms of property tax relief, and I know the Ohio School Boards Association is in favor of that. I mean, there have been a lot of proposals out there, right?
Correct.
This one was not discussed, though. This was just put into the budget, right?
School districts right now are, staring at the potential dawn of a new era of school finance, and it's being considered in the state budget bill in a matter of weeks. And that's why it's incredibly important for school leaders, community members who are engaged on this to talk to their legislators about the potential impact of this provision. Because once this gets in, this is not something that you can really put the ketchup back in the bottle.
Right. That's a good way to put it. The Fair School Funding Plan. This was something that has been in the last budget, I think, or last two budgets. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is this a plan that's still there? Is it holding steady? Where does that stand?
So what the House did in April is, after a considerable amount of testimony from school districts, school leaders, school boards, organizations, and others, they looked at the numbers, they looked at the revenue that they had available to the state, and they felt that there was not sufficient revenue available for what they deemed as an unsustainable funding formula. The governor had proposed years 5 and 6 of the formula with some modifications to the guarantee that resulted in a net cut of about $100 million over the biennium. More than half of the school districts were getting a cut from what the governor proposed. And so the House, led by Republicans Gail Manning and Adam Byrd and others, really rolled up their sleeves to figure out what can we do to reverse that outcome from what the governor had proposed. And so what they landed on was a proposal that not only does no school district lose money, but every school district gets an increase.
Right.
And that roughly estimates out to about a $200+ million increase for schools over the biennium in terms of traditional public schools. The Fair School Funding Plan, meanwhile, updating the inputs, accounting for that inflationary increase for schools, that would have been more than $1 billion of additional new money that the state would have had to apply, which would also have led to about a third of the school districts getting a cut. So the Senate right now is looking at the governor's proposal that results in more than half of school districts getting cut. The Fair School Funding Plan formula results in about a third of the school districts getting a cut. And what the House put forward, which is everybody doesn't get cut and everybody gets an increase. And what Finance Committee Chairman Brian Stewart said at the release of the House budget proposal was that this is a bridge formula. And the question is a bridge to what? So I think that's an indication that at least the House is committed to proposing a new funding formula in the next budget proposal in 2027. But for now, the Senate has to look at what the House proposed and what the governor proposed and figure out where they're going to go.
So as we know in the House, the cash balance thing was put in. In the Senate's version of the budget, what are some of the new things that we could see put into the budget on that side, in that chamber?
Sure. Well, the House obviously, approached property tax relief as a top priority for the chamber.
Right.
And I think you're going to see similar approaches from the Senate as well. We know there's a bill sponsored by Senator Sandra Bryan from Northeast Ohio that would make changes to what types of levies are included in what's called the 20 mil floor. And that has an impact on a couple hundred school districts in the state in terms of how they manage their finances moving forward. So we anticipate that legislation will likely be included in the Senate version of the budget proposal and possibly some other modifications to the cash balance proposal itself. Because it's a tough position to be in as a member of the General Assembly and say, I'd like to stand in front of $4.2 billion in property tax cuts, as the headlines read, and say that that's not something I want to support. So, we anticipate that there'll be property tax measures enacted in the Senate. The details we'll find out, early June, but that's one of the issues. Some of the other things that we're also seeing indications of will be led by Senator Brenner, the chairman of the Education Committee, Central Ohio Republican and longtime leader in the education policy arena in the General Assembly, was probably going to pertain to transportation for students. He has long been critical of school districts, transportation of community school students, non-public school students, has tried to find ways to encourage school districts to transport those students in a more efficient and reasonable manner, and to some degrees provide penalties for net non-compliance of that requirement. So we anticipate that there's going to be some outcome in terms of the Senate's reaction to some of the things that we've been seeing playing out in districts with their non-traditional partners through the budget proposal. Other things that we're anticipating are the diversity, equity, inclusion bans that we've seen from the federal government that are now being contested in the courts will translate to Ohio. There's a number of bills in Ohio right now that would ban public schools from having offices or programming or offices relative to that DEI programming in schools that would ban that effectively. And we fully anticipate that the Senate will be including that prohibition in their budget proposal that we believe would also be favorably received by the House when it comes back for conference committee.
So we know the budget process moves very quickly. June 30th is the deadline to get it done, right? Before we wrap up, any final thoughts for school board members and education leaders who are going to be watching this podcast?
Well, June 30, looks to be about 2 months away.
Yeah.
But really, in the proverbial football game, the third quarter is big. There's big chunk plays that happen, and you have to sprint out these times between now and May 16th, that budget deadline, to engage with your senators so that they're ready to respond and react to leadership, to the Finance Committee chair, to their chairs of their respective committees to know what's going on. You simply cannot wait until June 30th or somewhere approaching that date and be successful in your advocacy on whatever topic it is, education or otherwise. So the whistle's been blown, get on the field and get moving. Well,
thank you so much. Before you go, I just wanted you to give our listeners an idea of what your firm, Pappas and Associates. What do you guys do?
So Pappas and Associates is a multi-client government relations consulting firm that specializes in lobbying services as well as association management services. We represent clients in a variety of policy areas, from healthcare, nonprofits, local government officials, school organizations, and others. We've been in business for more than 30 years, led by Tom Pappas, a 40-year veteran of the Ohio Statehouse. And we're pleased to serve clients in Columbus, Ohio.
Well, a big thank you to you for coming here, and to Pappas and Associates for making this podcast possible. For more resources and updates, you can visit OSBA's website, ohioschoolboards.org, and always be sure to subscribe to the Leading the Way podcast. We'll see you in the next episode.